Hi, everyone, and welcome to Randi Sands and the Mediumship crew. As many of you may know, the third Monday of every month, we do an in-depth review of a spiritual pioneer. Our goal is to do one from every state, and we're on 2 of 50. Stacy and I are going to have a nice long relationship here, longer than some of my relationships have lasted. So So we should have fun with that. And tonight is Andrew Jackson Davis. I also want to let you guys know that we've decided that the first Monday of every month, starting next month, we're going to do an in-depth review of tarot card. And it'll be either one or two cards each week. I say one or two because we don't know how long it's going to take until we do the first one. And it's not going to be as much of a lecture. I'll probably do a brief overview, but then the whole idea is going to be to open it up for people to ask questions, for those of us that have been doing it for a while to be able to give thoughts, ideas, and just a nice exchange all the way around. And is there anything else I want to go over before we get going? Stacy, would you like to head on in to Mr. Davis?
Sure, absolutely. So welcome everyone. It's great to I just love sharing about our pioneers or our mediums or those of the past, just because it's a way to kind of keep their spirit close to us as we now become the pave makers of today, right? In this religious spiritual experience. So tonight we talk about Andrew Jackson Davis. Some fun facts. He is considered the father of modern spiritualism. However, he never really claimed to be a spiritualist. So this will be an interesting conversation. But of course, we'll get started with there's a lot to know about Andrew Jackson Davis. I just know a very little bit. There's actually people who have devoted their lives to his causes and to his writings, and as Randi talked about in the beginning before we started, his writings are not necessarily the easiest to read. You know, it's not like a light read. You just don't pick up his book and get it done in a day or two.
It's a foreign language. I've been on the first page for a month.
Yes. But I want to tell you a little bit of fun insight about him, and we can kind of, just kind of see where we go and talk about it. But he was born in 1826, and he was born to, his dad was a shoemaker and kind of this, alcoholic and not so present in his life, and they moved around a lot, and there was no education. Andrew Jackson Davis did not go to school when he was younger. He did end up going to school. We'll talk about that later on, but and he was kind of a sickly child. He had really kind of weird things happen to him. He had a wagon accident, and there was, some damage to his leg. And it says that when he was around 8 to 10 years old, he got deathly ill. And it was in this almost, close to death state that he had his first premonition, his prophecy, whatever you want to kind of call it. He was told that he needed to drink the water from the tree. And he had told his mom about this, and his mom went out, and it was maple syrup season. So she gave him maple syrup, and it helped with his cough, his lungs, and he recovered. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It wasn't until he was older, if you can see the picture of him behind me, that's Andrew Jackson Davis at about 21 years of age, that he really started to become what we call the first American prophet and clairvoyant. He, at the time, in about 1846, 1838, he started to go to what they would call a mesmerist. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the term mesmerism, but basically it would be the standard of hypnotherapy today. right? So it, you know, it was passings. The mesmerists would do passings over the body and put people into a trance-like state. And he could not. He went to like this big, now if you can, I mean, imagine, we have to also put ourselves back and see what the world was like in 1836, you know, or 1838. So the big thing was the mesmerist was coming to town. So everybody goes to town and they watch this. Andrew Jackson Davis watches it, and he's always been interested in knowledge. Even though he didn't go to school, he really didn't have any formal education, he was always kind of seeking an understanding, right? Always kind of seeking, he always knew there was something more. So he goes to this group and he volunteers to be one of the guys to get mesmerized, and nothing really happens. But then Livingston, who was another mesmerist at the time that lived in his area, which is why he's called the Poughkeepsie Seer. That's another name for him. You have to excuse my Midwestern. If any of you are from New York, I'm probably saying Poughkeepsie wrong, but sorry about that. But he met Dr. Livingston and went over to Dr. Livingston's house, and Dr. Livingston was able to put Andrew Jackson into a mesmer state, a trance-like state. And it was there that he started having these prophecies, these premonitions. He was the first that we know of that we would call an X-ray clairvoyant, where he could actually see the organs of the, you know, of the people and know which ones were diseased or, you know, not functioning properly, and be able to prescribe, you know, a cure or a healing for whatever was an ailment. And so he worked with Livingston for quite a few years. I mean, if you're going to quote me on years, just know that I'm kind of off, because this man did a lot in his 83 years of life. So I might be off a little here and there. But as soon as he started realizing that in a trance-like state, there was a bigger world, he basically jumped in and said, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And he would spend 4 to 5 hours a day in this altered state of consciousness every day. So I don't know if that's balanced or not, but that for him it probably was, I suppose. So anyways, getting back to some of the things that he brought us, there is some great prophecy that he brought or that he predicted throughout the world. And some people who study prophets actually say that he was probably one of the most accurate prophets, even more so than like Nostradamus, right? Because some of the things that he prophesied was in great, great detail. It wasn't vast at all. It wasn't like, there's going to be this machine that goes through the air. It was like, nope, there's going to be this machine with 2 engines, 4 wings, aerodynamics. Like, so he was very detailed in some of the prophecy that he had. And in this time period, in this, you know, you're talking about, you know, 18, probably 36, right about when he was about 16, he started kind of doing this, and all the way until his death in 1910. But this is also the same time that spiritualism is starting, that the communication with the spirit world is becoming known in homes, all, you know, just like it was an everyday word, you know, a medium, that kind of thing. And there was a lot of physical death happening because of war and because just of living, you know, a lot of people didn't live past I don't even know what but I think it was only like, what, 45 was, you know, those people lived to be 100, they were really old, you know, and very far and few between. So he brought a lot of our philosophy to us. So I'm going to talk about some specifics, because I think it's so fascinating. I think I'm more fascinated about the philosophy that he brought to spiritualism. He actually never, like I said before, even though he's the father of spiritualism, he never claimed to be a spiritualist. People, you know, because we say he's the father of modern spiritualism, people tend to believe he was, but he actually started his own society. And it was, I believe it was called like the Harmonical Society of something, I don't know, and it was science, and it was not religion based at all, because he wasn't a very religious person. He didn't really believe in that dogmatic type of structure. He believed more in this free thinking type of nature. But with spiritualism, he predicted, and I think we talked about this last month with the Fox sisters, because he spent every day in an altered state of consciousness. So like when I say altered state, it is kind of like a deep trance state. It's almost like Edgar Cayce, and we'll talk about, oh yes, Tammy.
I wanted to ask you, was he still using Livingston to go into this state, or had he learned to do it himself?
So he did use Livingston for quite a few years. Then he left Livingston, and I can't remember the other doctor, but it was the other doctor or the mesmerist that he went to after Livingston, where he found that he could do this himself. Okay. That he didn't need. However, the second doctor that he hooked up with, or the mesmerist that he hooked up with, they then traveled to New York City because they wanted to get this information to the masses. And so instead of being in the small country towns, they did go. And he actually, what was interesting about this, like, so if you can imagine, you know, a lot of times when people say deep trance state, most mediums look to be asleep, or I hate to say unconscious, but, you know, they looked, because they, you know, I've seen trance mediums who are in deep states get pricked by needles and they don't even blink. They don't even feel it. Like they're just, you know, he actually was able to get himself into a deep state and still be consciously aware, which is really quite fascinating. I haven't really encountered or read about any medium that could do how he did it. You know, Edgar Cayce, we call him the sleeping prophet, and that's when we'll get to Virginia. We'll use him. He'll be the one we can talk about. And he had to have someone transcribe. You know, he just went out. He didn't remember any of it, so somebody had to sit in the room. Now, at a certain time, not for diagnosis, Andrew Jackson Davis was very much awake in seeing clients and patients in a conscious, deep state trance. I don't even know how else to explain it besides that. Like, he would just talk to them. He would go into the state. He would see with his mind's eye, or X-ray clairvoyance, see into the body, find out what is, you know, discomforted, what's in dis-ease. And then he would prescribe. The cool thing about Andrew Jackson Davis, and again, I jump around in his entire life, again, not a lot of education in the beginning, very little, close to illiterate, kind of schooled himself. He actually became a PhD. He actually got a degree in the medical field. But it's not, and this is where some things it's going to be hard. You know, they didn't record the way that we used to. You know, they didn't, you know, they don't have these YouTube videos we can go back on and watch. You know, it's all kind of like either a little bit of hearsay or a little bit of, you know, whatever's documented from whatever perspective. But when he went to school to get his doctorate, to get his medical degree, he really didn't have to go. At that time, he was already a practicing medical intuitive, but he loved the school so much and what the school stood for. And because he was known for what he did, going there helped the school. So that's what he kind of chose to do. But yeah, he only used Livingston for a short period of time, had somebody else, and then kind of went in on it on his own. Now, one of the greatest stories that I think about him is kind of more something that happened when he was younger. Again, he worked from 8 years old. He was in the fields, working the farm fields. Then he started helping his dad work in the shoe shop. Then he became an apprentice under another shoemaker, and that's when he came upon mesmerism, and this is how it all kind of happened. But to show about Andrew Jackson Davis's character, he talks about in the book The Magic Staff, which is his first autobiography. He talks about being a young boy, about maybe 10 years old, and he had to go to the town store to pick something up for his mom. And while he was doing that, there were 3 young boys about the same age as him. Now, mind you, he wasn't going to school, so he didn't know them. And one of the boys actually beat him up, like just made fun of him, gave him a black eye, and just kind of got in a fight. And he refused to fight back. He just stood there. He wouldn't hit back. He wouldn't defend himself. You know, there was just nothing. He just probably started to go into an altered state. That's my assumption. And somebody broke it up, and he got his stuff and went home, and the boys. Now fast forward to like 10 years later, you know, he's starting to practice and understand mesmerism, and that, you know, is living in another small town, but not the original one he was in. And he meets this guy, and he realizes immediately on first sight that this guy is the same boy that beat him up 10 years ago. But he doesn't say anything. And him and this man become friends. And it wasn't until they were friends for almost 2 years did this boy finally realize that this was the boy he beat up at 8 years old. And he's like, why would you even befriend me? You know, and he was just like, because that was then, and that's who you were, and I believe we can change, you know. And I thought, holy cow, to have that kind of smarts as a young kid, like, I need some of that. How did you get that? So that kind of gives you the idea or the integrity of what kind of man Andrew Jackson Davis was. Now, don't get me wrong. He had, like, I think 3 to 5 wives. So, I mean, he had his fun too, right? But there was this integrity behind the spiritual work that was important to him. And it must have been all his life. You know, that's what I think, because how would an 8-year-old and then an 18-year-old be able to, you know, hold no grudges? I need a little hint on that, you know? So it's quite fascinating. So then once he starts prescribing, diagnosing, he starts writing also. He was told by his spirit guides that he should form a circle. And in that circle, he would go and bring through information from the spirit side of life. And this is where he wrote over 30 books. And Randi is I'm telling you, has anybody read any of his books or tried to besides Randi? Okay, Kat has. Okay. Most people, I don't mind it. I have to read it in small fractions. I'm just saying. It's not a sit down and get it read in one night kind of book. You do have to read it in small fractions. But I have read some of his 30 books, not all of them. But his mission was to really just talk about this altered state of consciousness, this spirit world, which he called Summerland. So like if we call it the spirit world or heaven, he defined it as Summerland. It was actually one of his final books towards the end of his life that he received through spirit, Summerland. It's better than Winterland, I think, you know, I think at least it sounds somewhat good, right? But he calls it Summerland. And he also talks about, well, I'm jumping around. I'm sorry. How his mind works is just unbelievable to me, because he prophesied and predicted so much throughout his life, just chapters upon chapters upon chapters of information. And up until this, I mean, and some of this stuff is still being proven up until this day. In one of his books, I believe The Principles of Nature, he actually talks about Pluto, Venus, Mars. He talks about the solar system in a way that no one at that time could have even known or even tried to predict. I just was watching, I think it was in 1993, he talked about, in the book, he talked about the planet Venus. And he talked about these huge mountains and these huge peaks that are higher than 12 miles high. And, you know, he talked about the terrain. And in 1993 or whenever NASA was able to get the best pictures, sure enough, there's volcanoes all over Venus that are more than 12 miles high. So it's like, holy cow, here he is writing it in 1860. And here we are in 1995. And, you know, he saw it, like he astral traveled. Like that's a lot of what his spiritual endeavors were, is he was taken, in his books he talks about being taken into the cosmos, being able to see into the spirit world. He spent most of his time in the spirit world with his guides and teachers, bringing back this information with him. It's how he also talks about the different spheres of the afterlife. So how it's not just, we all go to Summerland, but it's in that Summerland area, there are spheres where certain vibration, you know, certain people or vibrations reside, you know, and it's quite fascinating to think about, you know, like we all go to the same place, but then depending on, you know, our behavior or our, you know, our work, we have a place within Summerland where we, you know, we still exist in and still continue on. He also, my favorite thing, so much so that I like have it tattooed on my arm, my favorite thing that he brought to spiritualism, philosophically wise, right? Like the philosophy of spiritualism and living a spiritual life, is one of his guides was Galen. And you might have recognized the name. He was a Greek physician, like way long ago, way, like I don't even know, maybe AD, BC, who knows, way long. It was a Greek physician, like way long ago. He actually had something to do with when we finally decided to actually look at our bodies and have medical conditions. Like he, you know, so he was like pre-medicine, right? Galen. But it was one of Andrew Jackson Davis's spirit guides. It's how he probably knew how to do medical clairvoyance. He had a few different medical doctors from all different walks of life. But it was in this that Galen gave him what we call, and what he called, Andrew Jackson Davis also called it the magic staff. That's why it's the name of his autobiography. And again, it wasn't real, like a materialistic king, but it was a king nonetheless. And it was a staff, and on the staff was written, "Under all circumstances, keep an even mind."
What does that even mean?
What does that mean, right? So, you know, as spiritual beings, as spiritualists, as this, you know, as the spiritualist movement was coming together and forming, we knew that, you know, we lived on forever because of communication and mediumship. So, okay, check. Like, got that. We live on forever. We communicate with spirit. Got it. But then during this foundation, we had science. You know, we had scientists studying, how do these mediums know how to communicate? What energy is there really? What laws of science, you know, prove mediumship? So that's where we come into these natural and spiritual laws. And I think under all circumstances, keep an even mind is balance. I think it's the law of balance for me. It'd be interesting to go around and hear each person's opinion of what that means, because at first when you hear it, you think under all circumstances, keep an even mind. And if I'm truly honest, I'd be like, okay, yep, as long as I'm right, because if I'm wrong, like, you know, so it's kind of, I get hooked into the word even, you know, and that was kind of his motto. If anyone really met him, he wasn't hot-headed. He was almost kind of subdued in nature. You know, I mean, look what he did with that little boy who beat him up. I mean, that's probably keeping an even mind, to be able to befriend the guy and not even ask for forgiveness or anything, like not even need an acknowledgement that that event ever happened. Is that even? But it's actually a motto now that spiritualism uses in its endeavors. Like if you get a flag or if you see a spiritualist flag, around the sunflower will be written, under all circumstances, keep an even mind.
That's Jack.
Is Jack even?
I try to be even.
Yeah.
I'm a
It's-
bit uneven.
Oh, I am so uneven. I'm either sitting on the one side of the teeter-totter, like complaining because no one's with me, or if someone's with me, I'm going, you're going too fast. So I am not, you know. But it's actually a really, isn't it a really thought-provoking
It is. It is.
philosophy?
And you have to think, you know, that can be taken so many different ways. It really can.
Yeah.
It's very open to interpretation. And I'm kind of like you, Stacy, except I don't need anybody on the other end, because I'll stand on one end and I'll run to the other and I'll run back and forth all by myself. So
Yeah, I don't think it's totally open though. I mean, even is pretty much even. There's not, you know what I mean?
I don't know so much that it's just the word even that makes it so open to interpretation. I think it's the whole statement.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Gail's going to say something. I'm waiting. Gail looks like she really wants to say something.
I was just saying, why don't we open up the floor?
Okay,
Now,
if you're gonna let me talk.
Yes, but before we do,
Go ahead.
Jack, I need you to keep an eye, because I don't know if anybody noticed, but I think one of my computers bit the dust when we started out. It's okay, it's got Apple Care. So I'm on my iPad, so I can't see everybody to see if hands go up. So I need somebody. Okay, Gail, I'm sorry.
That's okay. When I was first learning about meditation, and I forgot how my teacher put it, but that statement sort of says it all. Aren't we all supposed to be trying to be, you know, I call it Zen. So just even keel for everything. My teacher always encouraged us to accept and allow, accept and allow, accept and allow. And so with Andrew Jackson Davis, when he was 8 and the kid was beating him up, you know, accept and allow. And then when you're 18 and you see him again, accept and allow how you are now, how he is now. And I'm not saying that I do that, but you know, I try to be very accepting and you know, of how people are and how I am. But I thought that that's what we were all trying to do on this journey. It doesn't that put you in a higher plane?
Yeah. Well, and he talks about, I mean, when he talks about the different levels, you're right, or the higher plane, or again, whatever, you know, semantics of words. But I think what I find myself getting stuck at is, what if I'm like, under all circumstances, keep an even mind? What if you're having super duper amount of fun?
Right.
Right.
In that case, I think of the scales, right? There's times that we have a whole lot of fun and the scale goes this way. And then there's times that we're not having so much fun and the scale goes this way. So I think it's trying, like you said before, to keep a balance, you know, or try and keep a balance.
I think he wants everybody on lithium. I hear that lithium. Highs and lows are just kind of like even.
I don't know if he would have prescribed that during his, maybe for you, when he clairvoyantly saw your head and your thoughts. Maybe for you, Randy. No, I'm kidding.
Probably.
It's amazing. Does anyone, I love bringing that topic up because to me, that's one of his greatest, you know, he left us a ton of assets. We can talk more about some of them too. We're going to talk about Lyceum and his work with Abraham Lincoln. That was kind of intriguing too, but you know, he left a lot of good thought-provoking works behind if you can read them, if you can get, you know, if you can get through them. But just that one statement, you know, of the magic staff, I mean, really interesting. Think about that as you go about your week this week. You know, think about when that person cuts you off or that person yells at you, or you're having a really great time and laughing and catching up with an old friend. You know, really, like I say, think about that statement because it's kind of profound. And, you know, it's easy to say when we're like Tammy was saying with the scales. Well, when we're super low, of course, we're dying to be even. But when we're super high, do we want to come down? Like, ooh, you know, those are kind of some really thought-provoking things. So as he goes into this, now this man was busy because he's diagnosing and prescribing, and he's seeing multiple clients a day. So now he's spending 4 to 5 hours in an altered state of consciousness, seeing clients through his medical intuitiveness. And a lot of his patients, for the lack of a better word, saw much success with his diagnosis. I mean, he sometimes was able to, he didn't know what to identify it as, like such as ovarian cancer, you know, it was a woman's disease, you know, but he was able to pinpoint within the body certain areas, like, oh, it's the, you know, before there was like x-rays. Like, I mean, think about what the medical world was like, you know, in 1880s, can you imagine? And he's being successfully treating some diseases that weren't even known to, you know, scientific, you know, I don't know, surgeons, doctors. I mean, they were still learning about the human anatomy, and he was able to see clairvoyantly. It's actually interesting because he says that in his altered states, through his medical clairvoyance, he could literally go into the liver and see every connection that the liver had and where there were spots in the liver and where and how. I mean, quite fascinating. You know, we have gotten a long way away from medical intuitiveness because of the world we live in now, right? Medicine has caught up. We can't diagnose or prescribe because of lawsuits, but we know that this is possible. Like Edgar Cayce, same way. They don't think Edgar Cayce and Andrew Jackson Davis actually ever met. I can't remember what year Cayce was born in, but it wasn't, Andrew Jackson Davis was still alive when Cayce was born, but I don't think Cayce started doing his, you know, prophecy and diagnosing and prescribing. But it's been rumored, again, so much of this is going to be a little bit of rumor or hearsay, but it's been hearsay that Edgar Cayce's son brought him one of Andrew Jackson Davis's books, and Edgar Cayce read it and said, that's creepy because that's everything that I experience. So they think that, you know, maybe the gift went from Davis to Cayce. Who knows, right? But the time frame fits. So in one of his altered states, so he's practicing medicine. He has an office. He eventually does retire from medical practice and actually opens a bookstore and owns his own publishing company. I think that's why he also like created books like there was no tomorrow too, right? He did those. He also created newspapers. He had the Universal Coleum, which was a kind of like a spiritual newspaper for the time. So it took, you know, science and it studied energy. It talked about mediumship, obviously. And I mean, he really brought altered states of consciousness to the forefront of science and investigation. And he did meet the Fox sisters. I mean, they did, you know, bump shoulders, as they say, once they get into New York and stuff, and was supportive of the spiritualist movement, but was really just concentrating on getting the word across that his spirit team wanted him to get across. And in one of, there is a, and God bless, I can't get through the first book. There's a 6 series called the Great Harmonia or whatever. And it's 6 parts. And I think one book is like 700 pages. So if you can get through all of those, but it was in that the children of the spirit world came to him. And it was said that the children in the spirit world gave him the idea of Lyceum, of children's Sunday school, educating children on spiritual work. So Andrew Jackson Davis is also known for bringing what in spiritualism we call Lyceum, children's and adults Lyceum. Now there's also another woman, Harriet Wilson, who's also considered one of the pioneers at the same time of the Lyceum movement. Because again, I think if you could imagine living in that time, especially in New York in that hot box, I tell you, if I believe in time travel, I am marching my butt right back there to that time. I am just going to get on my horse and buggy and scoot to like Hydesville, New York, Rochester. I got people to see.
That'd be me.
Wouldn't it be great?
They'd kill me.
Well, you have the suffragette movement happening. You have the abolish slavery movement. You have the Civil War breaking out. You have, and all these seances, like constantly, like, you know, Andrew Jackson Davis is having seances. You know, the Fox sisters are having seances. I'd just be like all over. I'd be like just everywhere. But it was, so with all this free thinking that's happening and sharing ideas, and if you think of it from the spiritual aspect, think of the spirit world finally being able to communicate instead of through just one channel, hundreds, if not thousands of channels, right? Like there's no one-way phone anymore. It's like a network of mediums they can come through. And they do, right? By the droves, like physically, there's physical mediumship happening, there's mental mediumship happening, there's healing happening. So, I mean, just what a time period to live in. So there is that Harriet Wilson with the Lyceum, but then also Andrew Jackson Davis. And again, I think mass ideas. If the spirit world wants our physical world to listen, they're going to tell more than just one person. They're going to keep telling the people till they listen, right? That's what I think they're doing. And so, you know, that's all kind of happening right around the same time, the Lyceum movement. But that's why, like in Lilydale, there's the Andrew Jackson Davis Lyceum building. You know, there's a lot of Andrew Jackson Davis Lyceum buildings throughout the spiritualist churches and auxiliaries throughout the U.S. because we really take his words from spirit saying we need to educate our youth and ourselves. So that's pretty cool. So I want to talk a little bit about Abe Lincoln because that's always a fun subject. However, I would really love, that's the other place I would go, right from New York straight to the White House, because history tends to blame Mary Todd Lincoln for being the crazy one, right? But Abraham Lincoln participated in seances too. It wasn't just Mary Todd's idea. Mary Todd just didn't bring all the crazies to the White House. It was the movement. It was the time. Now, in Andrew Jackson Davis's writing, he talks about the president, but he doesn't quite talk about seeing the president. But yet he talks about premonitions of war, how the war was going to end before it even started. Like there's a little bit too much, you know, these people might have had to spend some time together, like at least in some form, either spiritually, like, you know, some people believe Andrew Jackson Davis because he could astral travel so well. Like, oh man, the guy was probably the master of astral travel. I mean, if you can go to the cosmos and see Venus, for the love of God, can you only imagine the places you can go? So it's said that Andrew Jackson Davis might have hung around Abraham Lincoln spiritually. But again, you have to remember, we have all these mediums working now, and word gets out. So Nettie Menard or Nettie Colburn, depending on, you know, was considered Abraham Lincoln's medium, right? And she's the one who did the seances in the White House. But she also knew Andrew Jackson Davis. So there are some pieces being put together, and I don't know if we'll ever get the complete puzzle, but there's some pieces being put together that Andrew Jackson Davis was also helping Abraham Lincoln. There's just too much, you know, they both lost the son, and that's what really kind of made Mary Todd go out and seek a medium, as she needed to know that her son was okay. But then it was also the movement, it was the philosophy that was going around too. I mean, Abraham Lincoln and Andrew Jackson Davis both were highly intellectual men looking for a more forward-thinking, free-thinking world and society. And so it's just kind of, you know, it's a little bit of hearsay, but you know, and if any of you use your spiritual senses, you kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. You know, that really makes sense that they would be together. And Andrew Jackson Davis always never talking about the White House or the president, definitely makes some statements within his writings that he either had to have been there physically to know what the flowers looked like on the tablecloth that was on the table the night their son died. Or, you know, there's just too many little, makes you wonder for all those evidential mediums out there, you know, how did he know that? And so he makes reference to that in a lot of ways. He also, I mean, I could go on and on about so many things he predicted. He predicted illnesses, he predicted some vaccinations for certain illnesses, the planetary system, the, you know, obviously trains at a much higher speed, like the fast Amtrak trains, the airplanes. He just spent most of his life in this altered state of, you know, connection to the spirit world. And like, I know, I wanted to show, I'm just trying to, I see if I can stop my video here, change it. Because I wanted to show you guys a book. If at all you're interested about learning, oh, there we go. If you're at all interested about learning about Andrew Jackson Davis, if you can see this book, and then here's the writer or the author, Dr. John DeZolva. This book is a perfect start for anybody who even just wants to know a little bit about Andrew Jackson Davis, because he breaks it down in very, you know, a little bit more simpler terms than Andrew. Because here, so for example, Andrew Jackson Davis, this is interesting. There's a lot of people who really love this. Now, when it comes to spiritualism, the religion and the movement, we didn't use, Andrew Jackson Davis came up with the Spiritual Declaration of Independence, which is actually kind of almost like, you know, we have our 9 principles in spiritualism, but this was kind of something similar too. But I'm just trying to give you an idea, like, of what it sounds like to read him. But the past has vanished, and with the stupendous presence is before us. Here we stand upon the towering summit of the ages past, contemplating the world of matter and the world of mind. Like, it's all right. This is a little simple. This is a little bit simpler than some of his writing. Look at Jack, just kind of, I think you're laughing, Jack. Like, I just, you know. But but
I'd have to read that sentence about 6 times before it would actually make sense, before I could move to the next one.
Well, but this is a little bit simpler of a read anyways, you know, and the declaration of the spiritual premise was that we're just spiritual beings having a human experience, and that this spiritual world and all that who live and reside in it have more knowledge, so we need to tap into it. We need to use it. We need to take advantage of it, you know, and be more connected to our spiritual self than our physical self. is really, you know, to sum up all of his great works, he proved it. He proved it. The scientists, because he could talk the scientist lingo, you know, believed him, and he proved him, you know, proved science right. The common man understood him, watched his, you know, watched his diagnosis, you know, watched his cures, and he understood it. And he never said it ever came from him, ever. He never once took credit like it was me. Do you know what I mean? It was always spirit. Spirit always guided me. These are the words of spirit. You know, Galilean gave me this. And I just find it fascinating. So I think that's why we call him the father of spiritualism. Is he gave us these little tidbits, these little nuggets, golden nuggets of information to help us along with our movement. He was he was supportive of spiritualism and what it stood for, because spiritualism was bringing that spirit world in. He wasn't so fanatic about dogma or creed. So he wasn't, you know, when spiritualism shifted to a religion, and we know it became a religion really just to protect the mediums, you know, he accepted that, but he didn't necessarily become a spiritualist because of it. You know, he was more of like, I think he was more of the cheerleader on the sidelines. Like, you go team, I'm going to just stay right here and do my thing, you know, like, go team, you know. And that's cool, because his work and his writings, when people can read them, really help inspire a spiritual lifestyle.
Yeah, and that doesn't
Yeah, that doesn't, I couldn't hear her. I'm sorry, Randy.
that doesn't include me.
Oh, for the readings. But this is a good, simple book. I hope, I know we were talking about this too, and you know, I should have looked into it. I hope that someday someone will rewrite his works in more of a current time, and hopefully somebody is patiently sitting there doing it right now, and I will be the first one to buy the books when they come out. Well, it would be interesting too to see, because like, you know, like Edgar Cayce, for those of you who are familiar with him, volumes of books, like volumes of writings. Well, Edgar Cayce never wrote a book in his life, believe it or not. But, you know, all of his writings were then published into books, but all of his writings. And Andrew Jackson Davis was the same way, you know, with that many writings, and at least he did produce some of the books. I mean, I think his first book came out, I think he was like maybe 28 or 25 when his first book was published. So, I mean, he lived to be 83. He lived to be a happy, healthy old man with a big, long gray beard. And I think it was his fifth wife, I think. I know he did have a few wives. I always think that's funny. But, you know, it's the times though, too. You know, it was, you know, the times, and don't live long. And
Some of them, yeah, it probably died.
mm-hmm. Exactly. But yeah, so there in a small nutshell is a taste of Andrew Jackson Davis. Like I said, it's a really big nut, and we just kind of cracked it just a little bit, you know. But really, if anything, if you can take away anything from tonight, take away under all circumstances, keep an even mind. Just ponder that in your daily living.
Yes, Jennifer.
I'm interested in that he had so many wives. Did they pass, or did he divorce them, or you know, sort of taking, at the risk of saying the word, a feminist viewpoint of what happened there? Or was he just a rake and a cad? Or what happened to his wives? Like, what was going on? Or was he just substituting them out for each level of development? I mean, we were in effect chattel, right?
Yeah. So
We could
he,
not own property.
right, exactly. And I know for a fact that he did divorce, I think at least 2 of them. And I do think a couple also just passed away, like got sick and, you know, just it was their, because he did tend to marry older women. So, but he did absolutely, and this is interesting because in the Edgar Cayce Center in is it Virginia Beach, I believe, is where the Edgar Cayce Center, they bought a collection of Andrew Jackson Davis's personal notes. There's his walking staff. And I remember talking to the curator of that museum, and he actually was for divorce. Like he was pro-divorce, he was pro-women getting their property. Like he was absolutely supportive of women divorcing and then being able, like you said, they were really just property. They couldn't own their homes, they couldn't, you know, and he actually, it doesn't say that he was a huge like supporter of the suffragette movement, but he did believe in equality. For that period of time, I would have put him as a progressive thinker of equality. But I do know that he did divorce at least 1, if not 2 of his wives. You know, and I don't know if it was them that just took off or, you know, I mean, they're all, and we talked about the Fox sisters, and we could talk like Dee Dee Holmes, who was the best physical medium. They all kind of had their own personalities, that's for sure. You know, they had issues in lives and dealt with things, you know, differently, you know, than maybe what we would have, but, or maybe not, you know, I don't know. Like I said, I'm super protective of the Fox sisters. Like, don't even say anything negative about them because I will just jump down your throat because, well, because of the time. But like Jennifer's bringing up, the men had it a little bit more easier back then than the women. So I'm super protective of the women, you know. But, you know, so I think he probably had, you know, growing up in a home, not trying to justify, but if we think about, you know, our human behavior sometimes because of our programming. He really adored his mother. His dad was an alcoholic, and they were constantly having to move because of his dad's behavior or lack of responsibility within the marriage. So, you know, I don't think he had a very heartfelt relationship with his dad. And I think, you know, I don't want to say he had maybe you know, who knows, mother issues. I mean, his wife, one of his wives, and I'm sorry, I should have looked into the history more of the women too, but one of his wives traveled with him to England because they started a Lyceum program over there for spiritualism and science. And they received medals, both him and his wife at that time, for their work in developing the Lyceum. So I just don't know. You know, I don't know exactly, Jennifer, but I do know.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I do know, I hear what you're saying, and I do know what I told you anyways, because I didn't know that either at first. It was her at the Cayce Center goes, well, yeah, you know, he pushed for divorce. And I'm like, what? Like, where did you see that? Or how did you know that? And she talks about it in one of his letters to a lawyer. He talks about how women should be able to divorce if they're unhappy in marriage.
Well, just a lot of times when men wanted to get rid of women, they'd have them committed in that day and age. Yeah. You know, it was a convenient way to get you know, like, she's hysterical, you know, and literally they would commit them. So I know, and I wasn't implying that he did. I was just sort of wondering what that dynamic was with 5 wives. That's a lot of wives.
Yeah.
Sort of Henry.
Right. Yeah. Right. But he didn't have any of them committed that I'm aware of, you know, like, and I want to say his first wife passed because of illness. I feel like, you know, there was like 2 that passed because of illness. One was a very short time, like he married her and 3 months later she was, you know, sick. And I think he actually maybe married her when she was sick leave, like knowing that. but just, you know, maybe wanting to, he doesn't write much about his, you know, like I said, there's not much, his autobiography, The Magic Staff, it was so early in his career that he doesn't really write much about his personal life, you know, as much as I'm sure I would like. That's just like the Abraham Lincoln thing. There was so much under the table. If I could ever, you know, if we could ever really see it, I think we would be, you know, I think it would be astounding.
What about his?
I'm sorry, Randy. I'm sorry, Randy, I didn't hear you.
What about his church?
Well, he didn't really have an official church. He didn't want, you know, he became I'm trying to remember exactly the word, he was a harmonialist is what it was. And it was more of a philosophy than a church,
Okay.
right? It was more of, you know, it was more of that thought-provoking debate versus, you know, he wasn't really much of a religious man, you know, like that, because he was more, it was more from the scientific philosophical era that he came. So I don't ever know that he ever really formed, I think for a minute, like a half a minute, he decided like, that's what we're going to do. And then he's like, yeah, no, because I don't want it to be religion as we know it. You know what I mean? Like, or as it was. He wanted it to be more of this almost like research or a debate center. Do you know what I mean? Like a philosophical center where we could discuss what the heck under all circumstances keep an even mind means. You know, there was a small period of time that like I said, he tried to get together and he thought, okay, well, we can try this, you know, harmonial society where we could be known as harmonialists. And I think even on his headstone, it might say that he was a harmonialist. He never claimed to be a spiritualist, but I even find it, you Wikipedia, and it says American spiritualist. I'm thinking, oh, that poor guy is probably screaming from spirit. Like, will someone get that fixed? I saw Tammy had your hand up, dear.
Yes. I wanted to know if when he went ahead and diagnosed these people, were most of his remedies natural things, or would they then have to go and seek out like a surgeon back then?
From my understanding, most of it was pretty natural. You know, it was pretty, you know, curative, watch what you eat, digest this, do that, mix this and that, like an herbalist almost, you know, in an essence. Right. I do feel like there was something about possibly some sort of, not like, I would not call it physical surgery. I almost feel like spiritual surgery, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, working
I've seen a lot in the Eastern cultures where they do like, they don't actually penetrate the body, but they will use like their hands and do some kind of thing like they're removing something. And a lot of times that works. So, you know, it's more like a psychic surgery.
Yes. Oh, that's perfect. This is a perfect conversation for next week. I really hate the name psychic surgery. I think we should call it spirit surgery. Right. Because psychically, who's doing the work? You know, spirit's doing the work. Why are we ousting them and saying, we're doing psychic surgery? No, you're not. You're doing spirit surgery. But yeah. So I think that's, you know, from my understanding with his diagnosis, it was more in that natural, holistic way of healing. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, for some reason now Big Pharma doesn't like, but I just said that out loud, didn't I?
Oh, I believe in the natural remedies for sure.
Yeah. So
is your phone clicking? Is your internet connection clicking?
Right. All of a sudden I disappear.
Like I did.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I wish there was a way. There is, it's such a wish-washy time right now, but it fascinates me, the medical clairvoyance. It really does. It just fascinates me. And for him to see what he sees and know what he knows by being able to tap into the spirit world, and it's not like he just, that's the other thing too. It's not like he just did it one night and then just started doing it always. He really worked at it. He worked with Livingston for many years before he moved to, and then, like I said, he did end up going to school, and he was a registered licensed doctor, an MD. He earned his, and so he could probably practice medicine in the sense that you were talking about, but I don't ever remember reading about, him being more major into surgery as he was, is just literally scanning the body in his altered state, being able to get into the organs. And again, I'm not a medical person, but I do study some oddities once in a while. And back then, they didn't even know what half of the inside of a body looked like. They just had no clue. Like, they were just starting to learn about our internal organs. So for him to be able to be in it and to see it so clearly, so vividly, and then have it years later be known that that's true, is quite fascinating. Just too bad he couldn't write easier, that's all.
Stacy?
Yeah, Sandra.
Hey,
Hey.
how did the other physicians at that time interact with him? I mean, did he speak with them? Like, did he go to universities and, as a public speaker? Did they accept him, or did they think, did they feel jealous of what he could do?
There was, well, I would again start to, and again, this is more of a me presuming, but he did. I mean, he did. I think he had his supporters and his naysayers, just like, and it's almost kind of like today. You have people who are like holistic all the way, nope, pharma all the way type of thing. So there was that. I don't think everyone embraced what he did, but there were quite a few that did embrace. I know he did lectures, he did talks all throughout the country, and then people who met him, like Peebles, who met him, spread Andrew Jackson Davis's words across the country, and he did travel more towards the later part of his life, but he did travel. So I think that, I think he had his good share of support. I mean, when his funeral, when it was time for his funeral, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people showed up to pay their respects. I mean, he was a well-known man, it wasn't like he was just, like Edgar Casey too, but Edgar Casey also passed to spirit broken poor too. Like, I don't get it, sometimes it's like, it's like Van Gogh, your work is worth nothing. Now we all would kill for a Van Gogh, right? But yeah, so I mean, I think that he did have a pretty good support team of supporters, but then there were a few that he was a Quaker, like he was just, his stuff is nutty, I could guarantee it. I guess I've never read anything about him against it, or people against him, but I'm sure they were there. I could not imagine. But also, it was probably more towards the later part of his life, because if you look at the time that he was most active, you're talking about the whole movement of spiritualism, really radical religion, right? Because the Mormons were coming out then, the Shakers, the Quakers, it was just a radical way of thinking in that time period. You had the suffragette movement, you had the abolishing slavery, you had everything going on, in that time period. So he probably had, a lot of support, you know, in that time period too, because everybody was, and I say everybody, but I truly believe everybody at least dipped their toe in the water when it came to altered states and working with the spirit world. You know, that's why I say I can believe all of Abraham Lincoln, because I don't think he dipped in, I think he jumped in, you know. Well, they say, this is the thing, there's another good book, here we go, but now it's not by Andrew Jackson Davis, Randy, so you might want to read it. But there's a book, you know, Was Abe Lincoln a Spiritualist? And it was written by Nettie Menard or Nettie Colburn, who is considered Abraham Lincoln's medium. And it's a fantastic book. And it talks about in detail some of the things that have come. And, you know, his great speech, help me out, because it's on the tip of my tongue, I can't say it, the Emancipation Proclamation. Yeah, is even said to some of it to come from spirit. The first few lines were actually came through a seance. But, you know, I'm sure nobody really, again, watch out, be careful what I say, Jack, I might disappear.
You hear any helicopters?
Not yet, but I thought I just heard a door close, but I think that might be my husband having a cigarette or something. And then the door's opening, but I think it's just him. It is. My front door's open. We were just thinking I was getting taken away.
They're coming for you, baby. They're coming. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they'd like to add? Anybody? Jack, I can't see everybody.
No, nobody so
No.
far.
I know, because everyone's trying to figure out how they're going to process Andrew. Like, we don't want to read him. Like, and you don't have to read them. Like I said, the one thing, if anyone can take, for me, again, there's some really great people. Tom Krasley, his name is. He's from Lilydale. He is a Andrew Jackson Davis extraordinaire. Like, there are a few people that have some YouTube videos out if you guys want to read or, you know, learn more and not have to read about them. I totally suggest those videos on YouTube. There's a couple different people who just, you know, that's their mind. You know, their mind is like Andrew Jackson Davis's. My mind is more like the Fox sisters.
And girl, you better keep an even mind if somebody says something about the Fox sisters.
Oh, right. Actually, I know that's, well, at least I know my flaws. I know. I know where my teeter-totter goes, you know? Absolutely.
All
but
right.
yeah.
So if
I got one question left.
yes,
So Stacy, is there anyone right now who has the capabilities like Andrew Jackson that you know of?
Well, I mean, Edgar Casey's the last one that's been really studied. You know, I have to say from my teachings and the organization I belong to, we stay away from diagnosing because of the legalities. It's just, you know, a different kind of world. I have heard of some medical intuitives, but I don't know if anyone is doing it to the capacity that Andrew Jackson Davis or Edgar Casey did. You know, I mean, they were committed, and maybe even a little overcommitted, to be completely honest. You know, to be in that altered state for that many hours a day, that could be another reason maybe his wife wanted a divorce too. She couldn't compete with Harriet. Yeah, but not to the extent that I know of that's being, you know, scientifically tested too, because he was like, his diagnosis is and his prescriptions, he was a medical doctor. So there's records of how many, I don't know what you want to say, positive diagnosis or correct diagnoses and healings. You know, I don't necessarily know if on a scale like that, if it's being watched, you know, like, is a medical medium giving the advice, then following through, you know?
All right.
I don't know.
Lois, did you have a question?
There is somebody that I know that teaches a medical intuitive class. Her name is Christine Sonnen. She's out of Illinois. I actually took my Theta Healing in One Command training with her. And I wanted to do that class really, really bad because I do get medical information. And there is a disclaimer on the bottom of my animal communication form that says I am not a doctor or a veterinarian, and I am not allowed to diagnose.
Another animal communicator, yay!
But I do get very on it info. And I don't know if it was because I did work a little bit in the medical field as, you know, a CNA. But I don't know, I mean, I actually had an individual who, this is when I was first starting out 20 years or more ago. And this person said to me, my dog is starting to behave kind of erratically. Can you pick up on anything? No lie. I told her where the tumor was. And I said, please leave me out of this. Don't tell the veterinarian where you got this from. And the veterinarian's going, I won't do it unless you tell me. So he did. After she said yes, you know, I got it from. And I did say, I always say I can be wrong. I'm human. You know, I have good, bad days. I just tell people that up front. Because, yeah, you can have a shitty day, or there's an individual or an animal you just cannot connect to. It's like a brick wall. It's total black. You get nothing. And, you know, it's another thing I developed, too, when I was working. I could tell looking the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia by looking at the silver cord. And I could also tell when somebody was getting ready to go by looking at that silver cord. But what's interesting is things show up in varying levels of gray to black. Black is really bad.
For you, though, for you.
Yes. For me, it shows, if it shows up really, really black, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But also can tell if it's benign or cancerous. So I don't, you know. But yeah, we're not supposed to diagnose, but yeah, I can do that, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other people, you know, up front that can do it too. I mean, there's a person, she owns a crystal shop named Diane Bloom here in the Milwaukee area. I actually took a class with her where we were doing, using crystals, layers of surgery, psychic surgery in the auric field, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then you could use the crystals to release and correct what was screwed up in there. So yeah, there, you know, there are people, there's, Carol Meese actually has a medical intuitive package. And I ordered it, but somebody's got it right now. And I don't know. But it was an $80 kit with a book and like 4 CDs or DVDs on medical intuitive. And I got through maybe one of them and then got waylaid into something else, as we all do. And, you know, basically, you know, maybe someday if I talk to a person, I'll get it back. But those are the 2 people I know of right now that do medical intuitive stuff. There was a third one that wrote a book that I read, and it escapes me who it is right now.
Anthony
He
Williams?
was seeing clients.
Anthony Williams, a medical medium?
It was another female, not a male. That there is, yeah, I've heard of him too.
Yeah, I have heard of him, Eve.
But yeah, they're out there. Yeah, technically, I don't know if I would have got certified if I did take that course, because back when I wanted to, but I didn't have time because I was working, it was around $1,000. And then I would have had to do hotel because it was in Illinois. And now the same program, the last time I saw it, she was charging $2,000 for the program. And it was a week-long intensive. You stayed right there. And then, you know, you're talking about your food, your hotel, and everything. So it's talking around $3,000. So I never did it.
Well, I think when it comes to all kinds of mediumship, this is my perspective, when it comes to the medical, when it comes to physical mediumship, when it comes to prophecy, all of that, it's all being done. It's just not being, you know, again, Andrew Jackson Davis didn't say, hey, come look at me. He just did what he did.
Yeah.
And people just found him, you know, like because of word of mouth. And I think there's probably more being done behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
Than in front of the scenes. Absolutely. Jennifer, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have something to say?
It was more just sort of a political observation that you just made more concise. Like, if you could, why would you? Because you're just going to be held up to ridicule. And I believe that, you know, like you were joking about who's coming through the door. But why would anybody support that? Because it's free. You know, I suppose you could charge for it, but you're not going to be committed to a regimen that's going to be charged and insurance, you know, like it's not going to become an industry, you know, not if you can go to someone and they can tell you what to do, eat, you know, feel, exercise, you know. So I wouldn't, would you come out and say, yes, I can do this and everybody come study me?
No. Well, and you know what? Maybe next month why don't we do next month? We'll do Marjorie Crandon. I think she was from Connecticut, so we'll take care of the great state of Connecticut. I'm pretty sure she was from It was one of those small states over there. I'm pretty sure it was Connecticut. But we'll do Marjorie Crandon because she was the one medium that Houdini could not debunk. Out of all of the big scandal of Houdini debunking mediums, Marjorie Crandon wasn't the one. And like Jennifer said, you have to say God bless to these mediums who put themselves in the position to be studied, ridiculed, demeaned, dehumanized, really, is how I feel, for our movement. So we can sit here and say we talk to spirit freely and not worry about our door opening and someone coming to get us. Absolutely.
Tammy, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say this is going to be good for next week, Stacy. When I give readings or when I do hands-on healings, I actually feel in my body places of disease of other people, or people that are cancerous I see as a totally different color. Their skin is more like a waxy yellow kind of color. And but then again, I will only say that as I'm working with somebody, that this is a feeling that I'm feeling in my own body, and it may be something that they want to look into, but also reminding them that I am not a doctor. And most of the time it comes through that, of course, it's right, but that's spirit giving me the information, you know, and just how it comes through me. So, I don't want people coming and studying me, you know, and putting me under a microscope. Because it took me long enough to come out, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And just bless Andrew Jackson Davis for and again, he went and he said, that's fine, I'll become a doctor, with practically no education. The kid couldn't read until he was like almost 16, 18 years old. And then to see what he wrote and you know, it's mind-blowing. So he, you know, I think in a way he said, all right, you guys want me to be a doctor? I'll become one. Like, no problem.
Better than a shoemaker.
Exactly. Better than a shoemaker. Absolutely. Oh, very good. Well, fun.
All right, anybody else before we close? Jack?
I just wanted to say, I put it in chat that I guess he coined the term law of attraction.
Yes, in a way, yeah, he is credited, you know, it depends on who you talk to if he's completely credited with the law of attraction, but he started to define natural and spiritual laws. You know, again, that was that kind of time where the scientists were trying to figure out the workings of the universe and the energy in its totality. So that was, yes, you know, for the lack of a better word, yes, he coined the term law of attraction. From a science aspect, he knew that he could communicate, you know, again, you got to read him and it's hard, but he talks about like the vibratory rate, you know, and which we know now is the law of vibration, but he didn't necessarily call it the law of vibration, but he did talk about the law of it. He did say the law of attraction. He talked about a few different physical and spiritual laws, but they're named a little bit differently. So yeah, I mean, the guy's amazing. Like I said, if you can I can't get through his like 6-part.
He's like an interpreter.
It does a little bit. Even some of these words in the, you know, I'm like, oh. So
don't you find that back then too, they also wrote in a different style?
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's so much more perfect English, I guess you could say. And the grammar and the whole structure is so, you know, perfect. Yeah. I'm trying to remember, Hans Hosler wrote several books about the paranormal and ghosts and all that. He's a drag to read like that.
I don't
know if I'm going to
my God, yeah.
Listen, I like Andrew Jackson. He's not a drag, but his reading's just really rough. That's all.
Premise.
I don't know that I would even call it English, in my opinion. It's a foreign language.
Oh my gosh. I know. I was just going to say, like, I don't know if you can see this, but like his handwriting is, I mean, he is a doctor. You know, maybe it's just wrong. That's all. Maybe it was just typesetted wrong or something.
All right. Anybody else before we close up?
Nope.
Jack?
I don't think so.
Going once, going twice.
Thanks, Stacy.
Hey, thanks. This was fun. Until next week.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Randy, we'll just work on sending you all the healing that you're ever going to need.
Yes.
You got it. Yes.
I would love that. Thursday is the day.
All right.
And thank you, my love, for you know, coming in Monday and doing that for me. I will have to get everything up. If I'm feeling okay, then I'll stay with you guys while you continue to host. If not, then I'll just step away until you guys are done. And I want to thank everybody for coming in tonight and taking the time to be with us and to interact with us, which is why we went to Zoom versus Facebook Live, because we wanted the personal interaction and everybody to be able to, you know, interact with us. So thank you all very much. And for those of you coming in next Monday, we'll see you then.
Yes, and as for the rest of the week, under all circumstances, keep an even mind.
Stay safe.
I'm working on that one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Nice meeting you all.